So thank you everyone for joining. My name is Nathan Piccini. I am a marketing manager at Data Science Dojo, and I have Kristen Carer here with me today. And she is going to give us a presentation on effective data storytelling as a data scientist in industry. And as you just heard, Kristen is a LinkedIn top voice in data science. She's also a developer advocate at Comet ML. So Kristen, with that, why don't you go ahead and get started?
All right, gonna take it away. So thank you so much for joining me to talk about effective data storytelling as a data scientist in industry. As Nathan said, I'm Kristen Carer. I am a developer advocate at Comet ML. Comet allows you to easily make your machine learning runs reproducible using the Comet_ML Python library. So you could install that library and start playing right now for free. So this presentation is actually a look at actual mistakes that I have made throughout my career and the reactions that I received from the business as a result, and how I've improved. And so the hope is that it paints a real picture for you on the importance of what I assumed you've learned in your data science training about presenting best practices, and so that you can be a better presenter right from the beginning rather than going through what I. Okay, so basically, to set the stage, data scientists and stakeholders do not always see eye to eye. There are tons of opportunities for there to be strain on this relationship. And a bit of what that looks like is stakeholders can sometimes be concerned that they're not actually getting what they want or what they asked for, being concerned that analytics isn't going to give them all that they need to set them up for success. Sometimes they don't understand why it takes so long for you to run an analysis because they don't get that sometimes it can be very difficult to just even find the correct data in a database. And so, sometimes you can get into this place where they're asking for everything, or they want to own testing design, even though that's not their area of expertise. And so there can be, this strain on the relationship that goes even further than how we are presenting our results. And another way that sort of looks is, sometimes I felt like a short order cook, and instead of saying, would you like fries with that? It's, would you like t-tests with that? And there are certainly ways to turn around this relationship. I've seen the relationship turn around. I've given presentations that have gone over well. I've gotten buy-in on models and been thought of as a true thought partner. But, the way that we present and all of the ways that we interact with our stakeholders are going to help define this relationship. Okay, and so, like I said, developing our storytelling skills can really help in creating this trusting relationship. When the teams you support feel like you're giving them insight into the user that is data that they can't get at themselves, that's a huge value. When the teams you support feel like you're explaining concepts to them in a way that they understand and it makes sense, they start to really trust you. They want what you have to offer. And when they trust you, a lot of times, you can get into this great place where they just really see you as a wizard. You're not, but that it is a cool place to be. Right. And so we know that storytelling is powerful. So Seth Godin wrote this whole thing. It's an anecdote and a statistical analysis. Walk into a bar, and it talks about how dark and dingy the bar was, and the anecdote had fallen on tough times and experienced drama. And throughout this whole thing, you find yourself so focused on the anecdote. And the punchline is that the statistical analysis is in the corner being ignored, right? And basically the moral of the story is that very few people are ever going to remember numbers on slides. It is our job to bring our analysis to life in a way that resonates and that other people can understand. So now getting into my actual mistakes. So what do we often see in presentations? We're going to go through 4 case studies, which is really 4 different models that I built in industry and how I presented them, how it fell flat, and how I would do it over again, knowing what I know now. So the first one was a bunch of neural net models that I built to forecast hourly electric load for a utility company. And this is 2011, and this model, before I show you the next slide, it had a real business use case to help manage how our electric capacity on hot days. And there were so many valuable pieces of information I could have shared that were really interesting. And instead, I went with this. And this meant 0 to the people that I was presenting to. And I honestly thought that I was being helpful by defining the different variables that were in the function. This is the fastest way to lose everyone's attention. And once you lose the attention of your audience, it is so incredibly hard to get it back. And if you've never been in a meeting before that goes awry and tried to get it back, it is very, very hard. And yeah, I actually put function time on the slide, and I should be embarrassed. Okay, so what was really going on here? And so this was obviously before we had explainable AI libraries to help us understand the drivers. But even without that, like it's not even a library. In plain language, I can share that the inputs were things like temperature, humidity, dew point, what day of the week it was, what month of the year. So they kind of get an understanding of what variables are important, and all of these things we can talk about in plain language. And so really the way that the model was working was that it would look at previous relationships in the data set. And we expect there to be good predictions if the recent data, if I get a temperature that is in recent data, I expect my prediction to be good. If we're getting the first hot day that we've seen in a year, since it weights the more recent data more, the prediction might not be as good, right? If you have a 99-degree day, it's going to not use as much electricity, or the customers won't use as much electricity as if it was the 4th day in a row, a heat wave. And also, something else that we found was that when you have a pop-up thunderstorm, my forecast would also fall apart. And so this is a nice, straightforward example of what happens when we have a thunderstorm. The forecast doesn't perform as well. And it would have been nice had I made this slide in 2011 rather than, 2022 when I'm preparing this presentation. But so there were all these ways that I could have communicated with my stakeholders that involved looking at the data more, actually looking at the relationships and what was happening each day when I ran it. But, I completely lost the whole audience with that one slide. Okay, so, I knew I lost the audience. I'm on a mission to do better. This whole time throughout my whole career, I had always tried to improve on these things. I really cared about presentations, and I just wasn't great at it. And so we come to our next case study, and this one is in 2013, and I built a logistic regression model to understand for customers who had canceled their health insurance subscription, who was most likely to come back. Right. And so I went with this. And I really thought I was doing better. This was more explanatory than what I had before, for sure. I took the time to write out the main points. So males are 19% less likely to come back than females. That was great. But the table of coefficients is going to derail your meeting. You can spend forever talking about p-values. It's always a hot topic. Don't put them on slides. Don't go there unless your audience, it always obviously depends on your audience. And sometimes you may have a super technical audience, or you may be presenting to the rest of the analytics team. And then sure, but when you are presenting to your non-technical stakeholders, I've personally found from my experience that it's best to leave off p-values, because I've done it more than once, derailed a meeting with p-values. You know, I was taught in grad school, so my master's degree is in applied statistics, and I know that now, of course, we have data science education, so it's probably different and better. But, you know, when I was in school, we learned that like basically the scientific way of presenting. And so you were expected to state your hypothesis, state your methodology, show the model results, and give a conclusion. And so this is what I had learned in school. And then I go to industry, and it was just so far from what anyone wanted. I shouldn't have had a table of results, and I should have like grouped all these things for the stakeholder. If I'm making them read, you know, males, okay, and then next is whether you're single or married, it's not pulling all these things together, right? So what people are really going to remember is that males who are younger, you know, in their 20s, who are part of a couple, they're less likely to come back. They have the lowest probability of returning. But in our minds, when we say young men, we're already starting to visualize what that looks like. And we're already starting to think about like, hey, you know, why aren't young men coming back? Maybe it's because they just don't open up their mail in general, right? It could be one of a million things, but we're in a position where we can start to think about why that is. And that's what your stakeholders are looking for, just for you to spoon feed them the data, and do all this extra legwork. And we don't get this as, you know, output immediately. We have to actually dig in and do a post hoc analysis of our model to understand what these relationships were. And we found that women who were older and single were much likely to come back. Okay, so now we fast forward to 2018. I built a model to determine which customers had seasonal usage patterns of the subscription product. This was, I was in e-commerce here, and this was a, Constant Contact was a email marketing solution. So these people are small businesses, and they were using our product to email their customers, right? And so now I find that I've actually got it at this point. I dig in and find and grab information that wasn't part of the model. I'd even pull in people's names. I'd pull in specific data points, a specific row from my data, and I'd go and look that up, and I'd say, okay, well, this is Tim. He owns a flower shop. We can hypothesize that maybe people grow their own flowers in the summer, or it's just more obvious that a flower shop has flowers in the summer. I don't know. And if I've learned anything, it's that customer behavior is very often not intuitive and not what I thought the answer was going to be at all. But, you know, this is building trust in a way that you can very clearly see the seasonal pattern here. We're talking about somebody who has a flower shop. We know that flowers, at least I'm in New England, it snows in the winter. You can't, it's very difficult to grow flowers in the winter unless, you know, you've got some real structure around you to do that. And so, you know, when you're taking something complex and somebody is able to look at it and say, okay, they're telling me that they're identifying people with these seasonal patterns. I see the seasonal pattern. The idea that it's a flower shop makes sense to me. It really brings it to life. And helps with those relationships. And so then, I show another one, and this is an example where we don't see a seasonal pattern. And this is Jan, and she runs a church group. And so we know that churches take donations all year long. We know that people go to church all year long. It makes perfect sense that Jan wouldn't have a seasonal pattern. And so this helps not just in presenting, but also to validate our own, right? Which we're going to do anyways. Yeah, so the idea is that, it's not just because this model itself was really just people's usage of, how many times did they use the product in April? Very, single variate time series. But even though it was the only variable in the model, I'm still going to go back and I'm going to look at, what other color can I add? And also around, the piece of if we didn't have 2 or 3 years of data, that it's not going to work because they won't be able to pick up that seasonal relationship. But this is where I'm building trust, right? I'm not just showing them the results of the model, but I'm like really bringing it to life. Right, and so this is the 4th case study, the last case study. It's actually not in chronological order. This is 2016, but it was an example of really pulling together the narrative for my stakeholders. You'll notice that on a single slide, I'm also giving recommendations for how to motivate this particular cluster of customers. So this was a cluster analysis of the whole user base. There ended up being 5 clusters. This is just an example of one of them, but on a single slide, I'm saying, okay, who are they? What really defines this cluster? What are other things that we know about them by combing through the data and understanding their different behaviors? And then most importantly, how to build them. So these are my recommendations. And it's great if this is an aside, but if you can get your recommendations on the slide, that's amazing, because if other people come up with it and mention it, it's harder to get credit if your recommendations aren't really put out there in front. It ends up being more of a like, hey, we came up with this together after you've just done this whole analysis. You've already found these things yourself. And so you want to make sure that you position that in a way where, you're really highlighting the work that you've done. And so that ends the different case studies, and we saw that there's a number of ways that we can present better, and there's definitely some pitfalls that we want to avoid. And before we finish, I just want to make a quick nod to the other areas outside of storytelling and presentations that are really going to help you in your working with non-technical stakeholders. Because I'd say that presenting is one of the biggest pieces, but we work with these people every day, right? So how do we work together most effectively? And so one of the ways that I found that helped was to, create a process around anything that could be made into a process. This also sort of helps us set up guidelines around, in this case, it's going to be, well, what is the decision going to be made if the test is a success? Are we going to roll it out? And sometimes in industry, the answer will be, well, I wanted you to test this for me, but regardless of how it performs, we're going to roll it out. And so you can start to get at those pieces and figure out if your resources are better off used elsewhere, or your stakeholders can start to see that, when it comes to population criteria, if you make too many exclusions, now you're not going to be able to extend that to your base. And over time, I feel like by using something that's the same every single time, my stakeholders started to really get, the things that I was interested in when setting up a hypothesis test. But I think that this slide is really the meat of it. I've been in groups where there was definitely a strain on the relationship. And, I found that, we could invite those people to our meetings so that they understood what we were working on, why there's, a hold up on them getting their analysis, and the things that are important. And at the same time, I started going to their stand-ups too, so that I had an idea of what they were working on, what their priorities were. And it's just an opportunity too, to like show up and show that you care. But I found that when stakeholders are not consistently coming to an analytics specific meeting, there's just real opportunity for the whole, I don't know what you're doing. Why is this taking so long? And so like make it a process that they get that insight consistently on an ongoing basis. And it doesn't have to be the whole team. It's, one representative from each of the groups that you support. Focus on the big picture. I know I myself have a really bad habit sometimes of going into a rat hole with detail, but when I create a presentation now, I start with an executive summary, and it is, the 2 or 3 most important high level, what really came out of this analysis and what do people need to know, rather than going the opposite way and starting with, well, what was the data? How did we build this up? And building up to what is the main point. I suggest you just flip that main point first, right? And so all of these things, what we're really trying to do between like having a process, which, shows that you have a process, you have things together, it just like sort of legitimizes the whole thing rather than having everything look very ad hoc. And then, including people on your stand-ups, again, really starts to position yourself instead of as an order taker, you're moving yourself over to being a strategic partner. Okay. And so that is what I had to share today. So I hope that your work relationships are awesome. I hope that, when inevitably things do get frustrating, that, maybe something here you'll remember it and that it'll help you to improve those relationships. And that, when you start, what this presentation showed is that, I was improving on my presentation skills over the last 12 years. And so it doesn't come on day one. There's always things that we can do to improve. It's always nice to see other people's analyses. And that's one of the great things about being on, LinkedIn or just general data science social media is you see people talking about these things so that the information stays up front, and you're also able to see the, tips and tricks that other people use that they've found that has made their presentations better. All right, so that is it.
Perfect. Thank you, Kristen. Why don't we move into questions? It looks like we already have a couple of written out, and I'm sure people are continuing to type. One of them, if you are the Google Pixel 6 Pro user, your question is 1 + 1 question mark. I think we need a little more context than that because that equals 2. So if you can provide more context for us, that'd be great. But otherwise, Kristen, why don't you start with Chris Chua, and we'll go down the list.
Yeah, sure. So Chris asked, what data visualization tools do I use, Streamlit or Dash? So I actually am an R person first. So I use ggplot. I do a lot with Shiny dashboards. So I will use Plotly for interactive graphs on my dashboards, and I love ggplot too. And so actually, if I'm using Python, I'm going to use plot9, which is a port of ggplot. And I would highly recommend that library. They have the grammar of graphics. I find that, it's just a really intuitive, great way to do graphics for analysis. Okay, the next question is, do you use explainable AI tools like Shapely or Lime? Is it easy to explain them? Other tools are fine. So I didn't say it when I had my logistic regression model up, but if I was to do that again, I probably would use, because this was before XGBoost was built. But if I was to do that analysis again today, I would probably use a less explainable model with better accuracy, and I would use something like Shapely or Lime. And after I got my which features are the most important, I'd again still go back into the database and start to look at, if it's one of the packages that doesn't tell you whether it's a positive or negative effect, I'd start to dig in to try and understand that for myself. But yes, I would use explainable AI tools today. Another question from Chris. He's got all the questions. How do you present data from a data warehouse when it comes to big data, batches and live? What are the challenges? Let's say processing NLP, big data for, okay. So personally, I have, most of my career has all been in tabular data. So I haven't done a ton with NLP other than if I was going into the big data warehouse, it would be to do a data pull and search for something specific. I wasn't doing real NLP. And I actually have, so personally, all my work has been with batches. If you're a machine learning engineer, of course, you're going to be doing stuff live. The majority of the analyses that I've just encountered in industry or that I've had to work on, batch was fine. And so this is a question around time series data. What is the best strategy to make a good presentation of your data? So for me, it's really the same, regardless of, whether it's time series or, segmentation or whatever. I'm still going to start with what are the, high level results? What do people really care about? And then I'm going to try and explain in a way that makes sense to other people how the model is working and how I got at those results. And I'm not really going to, because, the different things like, you're not talking about ARMA errors or whatever in there anyways. And so I find that it's been pretty formulaic for me to create these presentations. Oh wow, we have more questions than I thought. Maybe I should be going a little faster.
Yeah, they really started to come in. So
okay. Kelly said, communication with experts and non-experts is so important. What is the biggest lesson you have learned in communicating with each of these groups? Perhaps it was one of the examples you gave. So, I think it was like 2016 when I realized that the same presentation I make can often be made into a 3-pager where I take, just the high level results, just the what's next, and maybe 1 or 2 really interesting insights, and that 3-pager is what's going to go to the, C-suite, VP level and above, and that you can't show up there with 15 slides, right? And so for my stakeholders that are more, director level and under, they get the nice long presentation with all of the information. Lost it again. So I think that, the idea that one presentation can be made into 3 that take care of the experts, the non-experts, and the executive level audience, I think was the biggest piece for me. Tiffany said, what is the best way, in your opinion, to translate this process from industry to showcasing in the setting of job searching? For example, showing off these communication abilities for GitHub, portfolio projects in Jupyter. So I have a blog. I highly recommend a blog. Actually, it's been invaluable because right at this point, I've had a 12-year-long career, and I go to interview somewhere and they're still going to ask me about the projects that I've done. And there's no way that is easier to look at the projects that you've done to read about it in a blog, right? Because, it's nice to have a GitHub with the code, and maybe that blog is your README, but to, really package up my thoughts and how I want to position myself or position the project. And then when it's time to interview, I go back and I just read all my projects, and I've got it right there with beautiful graphics. And I've referenced them before. I can go and just sign in, in an interview. And actually, I've sent writing samples to my jobs that I was going to interview for. It's like, and here's a couple of my projects, and they're well written, right? Because the unicorn is the person that can both speak well and communicate well and is very technical. And so a blog is a really beautiful way of demonstrating that, because it shows your ability to communicate. Let me see if I have any other thoughts too. I personally love, I love dashboards. I find that I'm always pointing to, hey, I built this dashboard, because it's a really nice application that you can show somebody and you can easily put it on the web and they can see it work. Whereas code and a model, there's this level of abstraction. Maybe the project that you do is, the output of the model is being fed into a dashboard. And so it's a hybrid of both. But, I find that it's really nice to be able to go to a website and be like, here's my dashboard. And they can also see that you understand the best practices for color, for arranging a dashboard, for determining which, metrics were the most important to look at. And like I said, it can still have AI, it can still have machine learning under the hood, and you can talk about the problem from that perspective as well. But, I think that, and that's just my personal opinion, that those are some of the most beautiful ways to demonstrate your real capabilities.
Yeah, and a little bit of shameless self-promotion here. If you do, want to host your projects on a blog, but you don't necessarily want to start your own blog, come talk to Data Science Dojo. We'd love to have you.
I get it. Where are we? It keeps going to the bottom.
We are on, I think it's...
Yeah, after Tiffany, Sepideh. Can you please provide some online courses or materials for someone who has a graduate level engineering background, but trying to learn the language of business to enter the data science world? That's a good one. So again, I think that this is, I don't have a course off the top of my head. I always struggle too with having, some technical background. And then when I try and learn something new, I'm like, how do I cut straight to what I want? But so there are, subreddits like data is beautiful, like seeing how other people are presenting data, following people who do Tidy Tuesday, which is R. It's the R language, but still it's, each week it's sort of a challenge. People take a data set, they, come up with their visualizations around it, and the community talks about it and stuff. And so, I find that finding the right spots on social media where people are talking about these things, and there's a huge community on LinkedIn. If you follow Kate Strachny, her whole thing is, color in data visualizations and data visualization itself. And so, when you get into the right pockets in the data science social media communities, that stuff is just like coming right at you, and that's still where I find myself being able to stay up on current trends in data science, is that it's right in my face. I get to see, somebody posts about this new Python package. Okay, well, now I know about the newest Python package. So highly recommend that.
This next question is a little long one from Vladimir, so I'm going to kind of shorten it up for you. So he has all this experience as a neuroscientist, but he wants to know how to break into data science or analytics. And he's wondering, what is the best way to transition his career? Vladimir, again, shameless self-promotion, come talk to me. We actually have a program that is specifically for people who want to transition into data science or analytics, but lack the experience. It's called Practicum. We have an information session specifically about this program tomorrow at 9 a.m. But I'll post my email in the chat, and you can just shoot me an email. Maybe we can have a one-on-one call. And I know a couple other people liked this question, so if you also want to talk to me about it, shoot me an email. I'm happy to be there.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think I'd add, don't discount how close you are. If you have Excel, Python, and SQL, a lot of it is going to be, finding those transferable skills that are going to allow you to promote yourself. There's a ton of, especially the softer skills that they really want in data science. If you have those, you want to be highlighting them. You may not have done analyses, but you have all these transferable skills that you want to try and highlight, and then you say, hey, I have SQL and Python, and so I won't go too much into that because
I agree with that.
Response by Nathan.
Yeah. Usually people are a lot closer than they think, and it's all about how can you market yourself as. You have the skills. Usually people have the skills. It's just, again, making them transferable from one industry to another. So but yeah, that's something we can talk about, Vladimir.
Nice, glad we're aligned. And then, so Chris asked about Tableau. Is there something else under that? I think Shiny can do the same thing. Okay, yeah, so I love Tableau. I've made presentations, or I've made dashboards in Tableau before. If you don't have Shiny or Python dash experience, Tableau is a great way to go to be able to show your skills. Using Tableau Public, which is free. I personally just use R because I've been using R for since 2004, and that's just what works for me. And I also like the opportunity to, as time goes on, it's becoming more and more of an expectation that you're able to code. So and of course, that doesn't mean that everyone has to code, and there will be positions for people who do not code. But if you're learning to code and you can show your code, that's a huge benefit. I've actually never used Power BI, and it really just comes down to what platform is your company paying for. And when I was at Constant Contact, we had Tableau, so I learned Tableau. Is it a problem that often these types of presentation formats are 2D? Do you think there is a gap there? if we're actually talking about 2 dimensions, it's interesting. That's another thing that, you know, I didn't say because it's just one small little piece, but I tried to make a 3D graph once for a presentation, and that didn't land well either. And, you know, I don't know if there's something around, you know, being trained to read 3D graphs that you don't just, that people don't just get out of the box, you know, they don't just inherently know how to read those. And so I have not had any problems with presentations being 2D. Scott said, Kristen, this whole session was awesome. Brave of you to share your failures. Share your conclusion first. So much gold, great stuff. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. Chris said, do you work with ML or data engineer in a cloud environment? So I have worked with ML. I am not a data engineer. I have worked in a cloud environment. You know, previously I was doing consulting. So, you know, I built models for ButcherBox and a couple other clients in Azure. And so that has been, you know, I really enjoy that type of work. These days, the models that I'm building are more for demo purposes, just because of the way that I want to highlight, you know, Comet's product and how it integrates with the different machine learning frameworks. Why are accessibility principles not foundational in data visualization? Mary asked. You know, and I agree. And so what Mary is referring to, I assume, is that, you know, we have friends that are going to be colorblind, and so we want to be careful about the colors that we use for, you know, the bars in our charts and the lines in our charts. And, you know, another thing that I like to do is use dotted lines and, you know, along with a straight line to be able to tell them apart when color is an issue. I think if you take like a really, you know, so I already mentioned Kate Strashny, but so she's got a color course, and I'm not sure if it's out yet, but I know that she was developing it. And so if you go really deep into color, you're of course going to see those things. I think that the accessibility piece has come up a number of times throughout my career. So it might, you know, blindside you the first time, but I think eventually people catch on with it. And I don't know, it might also be because I'm a job hopper and I've, you know, been a bunch of different places, but, you know, throughout my career, there is enough people that are colorblind that it does certainly come up. I do not. So Amit asked about thoughts on VR, AR. That is not my wheelhouse. So I don't really have any visualization thoughts on that. Paula says, I love data visualization, have some data science experience in the biotech industry and business experience with a startup. What do you think would be a good target position career in data science? Is there a specific name for a combo of those? Well, so, and I'm not sure if I'm reading this correctly, but if you have experience working in an actual data science position for the biotech industry, you're in. I've changed industries 3 times in my career. Obviously, we saw I spent time in the utility industry, in healthcare, and in e-commerce. And I'm very grateful for that because I was able to get a look at sort of what a large companies do, what do startups do, what do, you know, different levels of tech savvy, and what does that mean? So I'm not sure if biotech is like your specialty. I know that biotech is like a great area to be in. And so I think it's really just determining like where you want to fit, what size organization do you want to work for, and what industry. do you want to be in? Are you willing to try something other than biotech? And you absolutely can do that. I haven't had a problem hopping. Or, if you want to stay in biotech, that's fine too. But I don't really have a suggestion about that. What challenges do you face when automating the ML process in cloud environment or non-cloud? So I think the trouble that's come up most often is people are investing in ML and they see a model and, they want it in real time and they want it deployed. And, a lot of times for the POC, for the quick proof of concept that we put together, I can go to all the different orgs and say, hey, finance, give me the data you've got. Hey, customer service, give me the data you got. Hey, marketing, give me the data you got. And I can build a model, but none of that is automated. And when it's siloed like that, and you have to go to different groups to get the different pieces of information, that is going to be, there needs to be, investment in the infrastructure to support it. And so that's normally where I've found myself stopped, is that, we've got a model. Do we want to invest in the infrastructure to actually support that? If it's something that doesn't need to be real time, like, I've set stuff up on a Windows scheduler before that will run my model, take the output, write it back to the database. But that's, it depends on what you consider to be like automating. I guess that's automated. It's just a little Mickey Mouse.
Yeah. And Kristen, will have Patrick be the last question.
Okay. Patrick, what's a personal example of in your presentations perceived as both cool and also help resonate a strong message with the presentees? For some reason, it comes to mind that people always love maps. When I can find a way to work a map into a presentation, my stakeholders are happy. And that's, mostly joking. I find that a lot of times the things that I think are really cool aren't, and really it just comes back to the really pulling the holistic view of the customer and bringing it back. At the end of the day, that is what my, because analytics is a support function. Most often I have been supporting marketing, and they really want to get that full picture, especially if they don't have access. They might have a dashboard, but they can't get at, the whole little pieces throughout the customer journey. And anything that relates to the customer journey is typically a winner as well.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Kristen. And thank you everyone for joining. I'm just going to take control of the screen here for a hot second, so that I can share the webinar that we'll be having next week. And I believe it is sharing. Kristen, if you can just.
Oh, sorry.
Is it working?
What do
can
you
everybody see the quantum?
I can see yours. I see yours.
That's all I need to know. All right, perfect.
Okay.
So next week, same time as today, August 10th at noon, we'll be hosting Luis Serrano and he's going to be talking about quantum machine learning. And our goals for this presentation are that whoever is attending, you're going to be able to understand what generative machine learning is, and also what the fundamentals of quantum computing are. So Luis, he works as a research scientist in quantum artificial intelligence at Zapata Computing. So if you're interested in quantum machine learning, quantum computing, generative machine learning, please feel free to join. You can RSVP on our website. You can also RSVP on LinkedIn, or just wait for one of our live streams to pop up. So thank you very much, Kristen. We'll get your recording done here fairly quickly, and we'll share it all around to make sure everyone has access to it. Thank you, Fatima Rafiq, for setting all this up, doing all the logistics, making our lives easy. And everyone, thank you for joining. I hope you have a good rest of your day.